Hi, Church. Pastor Jeff here with another Trinity check-in, and I have to say something about today's scripture reading in our Lenten journey through Mark. Just in case you don't know, throughout Lent, we are doing a read-through of the Gospel of Mark as a church, something we've been doing every other year, reading through one of the Gospels for Lent. Then I've been using the Sunday sermons as an opportunity to provide a little extra context or go deeper if something's especially difficult to understand, to try to flesh that out. And today's reading, the one that came across the notification on my phone this morning, is a good and important scripture, but one that really needs some context in order to be understood well. So if you read it and you were challenged by it, good for you. Maybe you know some of this already, but I want to fill in some more. I actually grabbed my paper Bible. I hardly ever use my paper Bible except on Sundays. I read on my phone, but I'm shooting this video on my phone. So let me read the scripture to you. It's Mark 10, starting with the start of the chapter, Mark 10:1. Jesus left that place and went beyond the Jordan to the crowds in the region of Judea. Crowds gathered around him, blah, blah, you get the idea. They're trying to test him, it says. Some of the Pharisees were. And they ask him, does the law allow a man to divorce his wife? Jesus answered, what did Moses command you? They said, Moses allowed a man to write a divorce certificate and divorce his wife. Jesus said to them, he wrote this commandment for you because of your unyielding hearts. At the beginning of creation, God made the male and female. This is a quote of Genesis, by the way. God made the male and female. Because of this, a man should leave his father and mother and be joined together with his wife, and the two will be one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, humans must not pull apart what God has put together. Inside the house, the disciples asked him again about this, and he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if a wife divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. Okay, we need to talk about this. This has layers. There's history in this. I want to start, by the way, by pointing out that Jesus does something radical in this scripture, in that he's saying that the law given through Moses was wrong. Let's just consider this for a moment. Jesus is saying, well, okay, I'll get to this in a minute, but that's the first thing to notice. So let me explain it in simpler terms here. So in the law of Moses, so back in the Torah and the beginning of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, it's the law through Moses says that a man can write a certificate of divorce and divorce a wife. But here's the rest of the story. Now, certainly in Moses' time, but as I understand it, even more so in Jesus' time, if a woman was divorced, there was a good chance that she was a beggar, that she was poor and destitute, that her very livelihood was threatened. You know, when the New Testament talks about caring for the widows and the orphans, that's the reason those groups are singled out, because they didn't have a way of raising a salary, of having a livelihood, of working. Now, we can talk all day about patriarchy, and that's an important topic, but for the point of this, that's how it was in the day. So if one was a widow or an orphan or a divorced woman, you had nothing. You were poor. So if a man divorced his wife, it was making her poor. It was putting her out on the street in a very literal way, and especially if she didn't have family around, but maybe even if she did, it was the end of her life in many ways. That's terrible, right? And so what Jesus was saying is that you all aren't taking Moses seriously enough. Yes, the law of Moses said that divorce was a thing you could do, but look at the pain, look at the human pain that it's causing to these women. That's essentially what he's saying. At least that's how I read it. He's saying that a strict literal interpretation of Moses wasn't enough. You have to think about the women. Now, in our day, the strict literal interpretation has come back in many ways. I have known of a church, and I'm sure there are more of them out there, that was very conservative and literal in the way it read this, and if someone was divorced, they were not allowed to attend worship. Now, Isn't that missing the point, just like the Pharisees were in Jesus' day? Isn't that ignoring the need of the person, even though in Jesus' day? You want to hear one that's worse? I have a friend who's a pastor, and for a while he was in a very conservative church, and he had a woman confide in him that she was being abused by her husband, but that the members of the church had told her she had to stay with her abused husband because divorce was a sin. Come on. I mean, seriously, it's difficult to even think about that, and the pain after pain and the trauma. That's not what Jesus actually was trying to say, the opposite of that you need to think about the whole situation, that you need to consider the greatest commandments of loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus was saying that you all aren't taking divorce seriously enough. And I think that is the lesson that's still in here today. So I know we have members of our church who are divorced, and I am very glad that you're here, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That's not something that I've ever experienced my own self, and it breaks my heart even to think about it. But that said, is divorce a sin, as Jesus said? Well, here's how I think of it. I haven't known anyone who's been through divorce that wouldn't say that there is evil in the process. That said, sometimes a relationship becomes so damaged that ending it to escape the other evil is a lesser evil. It's not that divorce isn't evil. It's just that there comes a point where it's the lesser of evils. Nobody wants it to be that way. Nobody set out for a relationship to end in that way. And I think Jesus's command, what it's really saying today, is to take relationships seriously. And in fact, if you want to back it up another notch, those in healthy relationships should hear this as a commandment to take your relationship seriously and do what it takes to be healthy about it. But if you find yourself in a place where a relationship is so unhealthy that it needs to be ended, well, take that seriously too. And always consider, this is the heart of what Jesus is saying here, at least between the lines, always take seriously the human realities of it all. And if such a thing is sadly necessary, then do it in such a way that loves and respects even the person with whom your relationship is damaged. Because that love and respect, love in a different type perhaps than it was originally, but love for another human being, still matters and is part of the equation. Anyway, I wanted to give some context to this, in part because of those stories of it being taken literally and in a very bad way, and I wanted you to know some of that history too, because what Jesus is really doing is saying love your neighbor. What he's really doing is say take it seriously, as if divorce could be taken any other way, I suppose. I'll also add one other thing. You know, we've been in a season of, in the United Methodist Church, of disaffiliations, and many have compared that to a type of divorce too. Not trying to equate the two, but relationships being broken, that relationships between fellow Christians who've become so damaged that we can no longer walk together. Nobody wanted it to be that way, but there comes a time when it's the lesser of evils, and it allows both sides to walk well and to walk upright and to follow God with their conscience once again. And that is actually something to be celebrated and something to remember, that God brings healing on the other side. You know, the scripture that's here presented to us in Mark uses the word sin, but the other thing we have to remember about sin is Jesus on the cross, that sin is something for which God has grace, that it's not something any of us want, but it's something that God has a tendency to turn into something better and to bring healing out of. So if you've ever been in that position, then I hope that healing has already been your experience, and I hope it continues to be. If it hasn't been your experience yet, then I hope healing comes your way, and I hope you'll pray for anyone who's in a damaged relationship. And I also hope you'll remember the underlying message of this, which is take seriously your neighbor, no matter who that may be, and love them, even if that love takes a different form. All right. I wanted to add some context there. Like I said, not quite enough for a Sunday sermon, but important. And I certainly didn't want anybody to walk away from that scripture with what I believe to be the wrong message in some cases. I hope you all are well. I hope your relationships are healthy. I hope you're enjoying the fine weather. Boy, there have been a lot of people out walking lately. It's nice. And even though we have some showers coming, hopefully we can enjoy those too. I will see you soon, church. Have a good evening.